Imagine this. It's 2035, and there's a plentiful supply of housing to choose from that's beautiful, sustainable, and get this, affordable. How did that happen, Matthias?
Well, first, the private sector has moved a lot. So construction companies hopefully have moved to modular housing. Developers have moved to more innovative financing models. And building materials manufacturers have hopefully made their processes much more sustainable. So that's the private sector. Secondly, the public sector has moved. It hopefully has simplified the permitting process. It hopefully has done its part to close the talent gap, which is an important part. And then lastly, hopefully also the private and the public sector have come together to solve some of the issues. Take, for example, the complexity inherent today in the building process. This can only be solved if the private sector and the public sector come together on things such as unified building codes or technical standards.
That's Matthias Tauber, Managing Director and Head of BCG's operations in Europe, the Middle East, South America, and Africa. And I'm Patricia Sobka. Welcome to Imagine This, where we take a trip into the future we hope will challenge the way you think and act today. A housing crisis is sweeping the globe, and that's no exaggeration. The UN estimates 1.6 billion people currently lack adequate housing, and that figure could nearly double to 3 billion by the end of this decade. Many factors are to blame: policy failures, urbanization, not enough public housing, and of course, investors buying homes not to live in themselves, but to rent out and turn a profit. Right now, in the U.S. alone, demand for housing exceeds supply by 4 million units. Is it any wonder that a majority of Americans can't afford a medium-priced home? So what are the roadblocks to making homes more affordable? In this episode, we'll examine a path forward that includes modular homes, innovative financing, and a more hospitable policy environment for home building. Also joining the conversation, Jean, my AI co-host. Welcome, Jean. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jean. Imagine if we could listen in on the dynamic synergy between public and private sectors, reshaping the housing landscape, modular homes, innovative financing, fascinating times. Patricia, Matthias, welcome. Excited to break it down.
A quick note on how we use Jean. Jean is processing and responding to our conversation in real time. We haven't scripted any of Jean's questions or commentary, although we do edit down the entire conversation for length and clarity. So, the need for affordable housing cannot be overstated. It's a basic human right to have a roof over your head. So tell us, Matthias, how did we get to this point where there's such a dire shortage of homes available for a growing population?
Well, in the US, in the early 2020s, we're talking about 1.5 million housing starts every year. That is about the same number as we saw in the 1950s. The same is true in Germany. We're talking about 200,000 housing starts every year, whereas the country would need 400,000. So we are seeing too few units being built. And at the same time, we are also seeing the wrong units that have been built. And as a consequence, housing does become unaffordable to many. And we see a situation where housing is unaffordable for many of the young. So typically we talk about unaffordability when housing cost exceeds 30% of a buyer's income. And by that metric, many big cities have now for several years been caught in a spiral of unaffordability.
This is obviously a very complex issue with many factors at play. Let's break it down piece by piece. In this future of affordable, beautiful, sustainable housing, specifically what's changed about how homes are built?
So there has been a lot of change in two dimensions. One, how homes are being built, but then also what kind of homes are being built. First, the construction industry has changed the way it approaches the building of a house. It uses much more modular construction techniques. So prefab, standardization is sort of preeminent and reduces complexity. Secondly, technology, AI, is a huge part of how the construction industry works. To give a few examples there, software companies already today play a more important role in the construction process than you may think. Think about Procore, for example, which provides construction management software. They have incorporated quite a number of AI tools in their current processes, or even construction companies in instances do develop proprietary AI tools for HR matters, for reporting policies and so on. So all of this is happening today, and it will happen to a much bigger degree in 2035 when the whole crisis has been solved, increasing productivity of the construction industry, which ultimately is a big problem today.
So what would these new modular homes look like, and how would it feel to live in one of them?
There is no more one size fits all. There is many different concepts of a home in that future. So one is sort of what we type affordable. That is relatively low cost units. The standard may not be the highest. It's things that are built super fast in a cost effective way. And also layouts are relatively standardized. Secondly, we do see emerging the shared units. So this is smaller units. There may be even the potential for subscription models. Thirdly, we will see units catering specifically to a segment that really cares about the environment. So those are units that are built in a zero waste way. I would hope that the entire ecosystem ultimately is a more sustainable ecosystem. And that includes, of course, better insulated homes, which is a huge lever, but also renewable energy to heat them. So those are units we will see emerging. We will see them emerging first in the larger centers and then of course, growing there, and thereafter, hopefully also spreading.
Let's bring Jean into the conversation now. Jean, bring a skeptical eye to this conversation for us. What are some of the potential downsides of ubiquitous modular homes?
Potential downsides? Well, imagine a world with cookie-cutter homes lacking in character. And what about the potential environmental waste if these modular units aren't designed with recycling in mind? Standardization might stifle creativity too. Thoughts, Matthias?
Oh, it's great points, Jean. I think those are two risks. I would say on the sustainability aspect, first of all, I do think we will see many, many more homes being built with a consumer in mind that really would like to have an eco-friendly home. So building materials will in future be manufactured in a much more sustainable way, so CO2 friendly and so on, and hopefully they would go into these new homes. So for example, we see cement, which is a major contributor to the CO2 footprint of a home, hopefully in future being produced with a much lower CO2 intensity. So that's on the sustainability side. Now, secondly, you bring up a challenge on, well, will all these homes look the same? And my answer would be absolutely not. I think we are probably seeing more variety in future. I said before, it's no one size fits all. And that's super important because one of the problems of today's shortage is that it's not just we haven't built enough units, we actually built the wrong units. We built the wrong units already for today's population, and we certainly built the wrong units for the population which we're going to have in 2035. And if anything, the population in 2035 is a more diverse population, both in terms of its age footprint, but also in terms of the other key characteristics of its demography. So I would hope that whatever we build fits much more this new population. And modular housing doesn't mean that it all looks the same. You can build in plenty of variability in there where you need it, but you actually can take out the variability where it's just a cost.
So Jean has an observation to make. Go ahead, Jean.
Always a risk when multiplying a flawed design indeed. Have we considered how emerging quality assurance technologies like AI-driven inspections or predictive maintenance could preemptively catch and mitigate these potential design flaws before scaling? After all, ensuring variation doesn't invite error is key.
So, Jean, you're spot on. AI-driven inspection, in fact, is already today part of the process. So several of the software providers do incorporate that already. And I'm absolutely sure we will see more of that.
I want to talk about the impact that this could have on jobs, construction jobs specifically. They have a multiplier effect on local economies that's extremely virtuous. Would the move toward modular homes impact construction jobs negatively or positively?
Well, I would absolutely say this will have a positive impact. Why? Look, one of the major bottlenecks in today's housing supply chain is in fact a talent shortage. Today, we have too few people working in the construction industry, and those too few people are one of the major reasons why we build not enough units. So if anything, technology can help unlock that. I would go further, and it's not just about increasing productivity. I would also say that technology will make these jobs more interesting, because one of the reasons why we see the talent shortage is that some of these jobs are not as interesting. And by using AI and other technologies, we will make these jobs more interesting, we will make them safer, we will make them more attractive, and we will probably also attract a more diverse workforce into these jobs. Because remember, today it's still a super male population that is attracted by construction jobs, all of which doesn't add to great creativity, great productivity, and so on. So I think technology really is part of the solution here and not part of the problem.
Obviously, the construction industry will be impacted by this, the home building industry, but more specifically, how could it change the industry and other businesses that feed into it?
Well, it's a great question, Patricia. And look, first of all, obviously the construction industry as such will change. Construction companies will move from I produce a single unit type companies to more industrial setups where they manufacture homes. Then other industries that feed into the construction process will change. So, for example, building material manufacturers will change insofar as they will produce much more prefabricated materials. So, for example, when it comes to concrete companies, they will produce probably less ready-mix concrete. They will produce more precast concrete. Then in between, the way building materials are going to be distributed and delivered to construction sites is going to change. So at the moment, there are traders, there are distributors in between the building material companies and the construction companies. I think we will probably see a more efficient way of distribution coming, also potentially with some disintermediation here facilitated by online marketplaces and others. And then lastly, we will see the financing aspect of this changing. So developers, but also banks providing financing will have to change. They will have to offer a much greater variety of financial products, and developers will have to think differently about the projects they tackle.
Jean has an observation to make. Go ahead, Jean.
How do you see the juxtaposition of tradition and innovation? Do established architectural norms and cultural values pose obstacles or provide opportunities for integrating modular housing solutions? Insights on blending old worlds with new approaches?
That's a great question, Jean. So I do think some of the norms on how houses have been built in most of continental Europe, they are an obstacle to, I would say, a more productive housing stock. One example of this is the single-family home. So Germany, much as other places in continental Europe, have large markets for the single-family home. Now, the single-family home is not the most effective way of building a unit. The multifamily home is a much more effective way, specifically sort of as you move into more urban areas, right? And shifting away from the single-family home to the multifamily home is one thing which hopefully will facilitate a more productive housing supply chain.
Let's take a look at another country with a serious shortfall, of course, the United States, where some of the most heavily populated urban and suburban areas are the hardest place to build. This cuts to the heart of what you were talking about earlier, Matthias, which has to do with permitting. Now, in places where we need more housing units, especially multifamily homes, local zoning laws will prohibit or seriously restrict building them. Why is that happening, and what can be done about it? And how do modular homes figure in here?
So permitting has many aspects, and it's hard, as you put it. Current inhabitants, they do have an incentive to be restrictive on zoning laws, right? So I do think you need to create political incentives for people who can sort of influence the process to allow new homes to be built. So that's one aspect of it. There is a second aspect of it, which is, in my view, probably easier and more pragmatic to tackle, and that is sort of the process of permitting as such. It's a relatively long process, and it's a relatively, today still, I would say, non-digital process. Digitizing that process makes a big deal of a difference. We know that by using digital tools along the permitting process, you can cut the time which it takes for a new housing permit by a third. That's huge.
So that is a dramatic acceleration. But let's get back to the first part of that equation that you raised, which was specifically the NIMBY-minded people, the not in my backyard. They don't want it built there. What are the trade-offs for politicians and NIMBY-minded urban and suburban dwellers? How to convince them that it's worth it to allow more permitting of these homes and these modular homes?
Well, this is a hard one. I think you essentially face a basic question of sort of the haves versus the have-nots. And I think you need to convince the haves that you sort of take away a little bit to give it sort of to other people. And I do think you need to convey to them the benefits of a vibrant community. One of the directions some jurisdictions have been taking is that along with new units, new investments into community spaces have happened. This can be community spaces or infrastructure for children. It can be community space infrastructure around the health side and so on. So you do need to combine new units, first of all, with a good way of doing it. But secondly, you do need to combine it with sort of investment into the common good.
So Jean has a question to throw into the mix. Go ahead, Jean.
As we look forward to 2035, how do you think societal perceptions of home ownership versus renting will evolve? Will the shift towards modular homes redefine the notions of stability and investment tied to traditional home ownership?
I do think that societal norms or the change of those societal norms will play a huge role. I'm not sure it's the fact that we'll have modular homes that will change our attitudes to home ownership. So, for example, the fact that people get older, people have fewer children, people move more often, do make the business case of owning versus renting a different one. There is one downside to that from a society perspective. At least in the last 20 years, home ownership was a major part of families, people's investments, and it was a way to accumulate wealth. That would fall away. And if that falls away, I do think we all have a responsibility to provide people with alternatives to cater for that.
We need to take a short break, but when we return, we're going to look at how governments and banks could work together to change how homes are financed.
Hi, I'm Bill Moore, part of the team that created Gene. Have you ever wondered what happens when an architect teams up with an AI to design the eco-home of the future? Stick around after the episode.
Welcome back to Imagine This. I'm Patricia Sobka. Let's return to our conversation with BCG's Matthias Tauber. Matthias, in our future housing utopia, how does our standard way of financing homes, the ubiquitous 30-year mortgage in the United States, for example, how does that change and allow more people to own homes? Or will it be, as you said, more people are going to move toward renting?
So I do think that more people will rent in future, and it's sort of a very specific way to address, I would say, new forms of, or to tap into new forms of financing for the home. So that's going to be part of the solution. I also think we will see a more varied portfolio of products being used on the mortgage side. This, as you said, can be the 30-year mortgage loan. But I do think we will see products that cater to different living situations. As we move into demographic change, 30 years may be too long for several of the participants, for example. I also think we should not fall under the illusion that the basic principles of finance are not going to be there. They will be there. And that's why I do think a key part of this will be a shift to rental.
On the rental question, Jean has another question to ask you. Go ahead, Jean.
Amidst this shift towards rental housing, how do you anticipate the dynamics of urban versus suburban areas will evolve? Are we looking at rental-friendly cityscapes only? Or does suburban living get a modular makeover too?
So first, make no mistake, urbanization is going to continue. We all thought in the pandemic that maybe urbanization has a break. The reality is it didn't happen. So we will see by 2030 or 2035 more people living in cities than we do see today. So that's the first thing I think we do need to anticipate. Secondly, The way housing looks like in urban areas and in suburban areas is different today, and it will be different in future. Today, we see more single-family units in suburban settings. We see more multifamily units in urban settings, and so on. In both areas, the housing stock will be, hopefully, a more productive one by 2030. So we will see more multifamily units also on the suburban side. That's what's going to happen. And we'll hopefully see a much more varied housing stock in urban settings.
Let's tackle another part of this whole conundrum, which is corporations and investors buying up houses to rent. In Germany, for example, corporate landlords have been buying up public housing stock, and that has driven rents up a tremendous amount. So how in the future do we keep rents affordable for people who may never buy a home?
So I'm a believer in free markets. Maybe there is some, I would say, boundary conditions needed, but at the end of the day, supply and demand is what will sort of rule. So all solutions which come with price caps on rents have, look, this is my view, failed. So the only solution at the end of the day is to build more units and to build units that match demand better. And the reason why today we see rents rising is simply a reflection of the fact that we have built too few units and that we have built the wrong units, and demand is high and demand will continue to rise. It will continue to rise because we see more, as I said before, urbanization. It will continue to rise because we see population growth. It will continue to rise because we see smaller households, and it will continue to rise because people become older and live longer and have a need for housing for a much longer period of time. So again, I think really the unlock is to build more units and to build the right units.
Jean has another observation to share. Go ahead, Jean.
With all these advancements, have we thought about the unintended consequences of rapid urbanization? Could modular housing inadvertently fuel excessive urban sprawl? How do we ensure balanced, sustainable growth without cities sprawling out of control?
It's a great question. So urbanization is going to be here. It's going to be here even more in the decades to come. And the role cities play will be a massively different one. So cities need to be governed in the right way. They need to be planned for the long run. And they need to be planned also for the long run, not just for their inhabitants, but also with the environment in mind. So to give an example, sort of the way you organize traffic in cities is going to change. It's going to have to change. So we avoid, Jean, the scenario you described.
Let's stay with sustainability, because right now many homes are expensive to build. They're expensive to heat and to cool. How will that change in the future?
So energy efficiency is a major deal for housing of the future. Already today, we see there is two markets for housing units. One is a market for housing units which have been built according to energy efficiency standards of the 70s, the 80s, which are lower than today's. And then there is a second market where units have been built to the energy efficiency standards of today, which is much better insulated homes, which consume much fewer energy and so on. And with energy prices on the rise, this is also from a business case perspective becoming an increasingly important dimension for home builders to consider. Now, if I fast forward 15, 20 years, I think this will be built into the housing supply chain in a much more integral way. First of all, the regulator will demand it. But secondly, also, we will see more innovative insulation materials. We will see maybe more natural insulation materials. Remember that many of the insulation materials we use today are still oil-based. So if you think about EPS or XPS, which are essentially oil-based insulation materials, I would hope that we can move them to more natural, mineral-based, even in instances wood-based insulation materials, by that sort of creating a more sustainable housing supply chain overall.
Now, when we talk about sustainable housing, and especially more energy efficient, that often makes us feel that we're going to have to live in smaller homes overall. If that is the case, do you see something in the design evolution happening that smaller spaces will feel bigger to live in?
So first of all, the data says that the average size of the home per capita has been rising. So it may feel to us that we live in ever smaller homes. As a matter of fact, we don't, which in part creates the shortage we have at the moment. Now, fast forwarding 10, 15 years, I would expect the trend to continue. People do want enough space, and people will need more space also because of the need or the move to smaller sized households and so on. So on a per capita basis, the number of square meters required will most likely rise. Now, in addition to that, I do think that there is a number of efforts underway to not just factually have larger homes, but also to have them feel larger. So, for example, we will see a set of units coming on the market which heavily leverages common spaces. By leveraging common spaces, it will feel bigger, or the space available to you will feel bigger to you.
Jean has another question to ask. Go ahead, Jean.
Considering the move towards more energy-efficient homes, ever think about the role of renewable energy sources like solar or wind? Are we looking at fully self-sufficient, grid-independent homes by 2035, or will integrated community-based power systems dominate the scene?
So my view is we will see a mix here. Again, not one size fits all. I do think we will see many more homes equipped with batteries. I do think we will see many, many more homes equipped with their own production systems. But equally, we will see other energy systems on the rise as well, like the community-based ones you described. So we will see a much more heterogeneous landscape of the way homes do get their power than today.
Jean, what are some of the things that might disrupt this path to a future with more sustainable, beautiful, affordable, modular homes?
Let's dive into potential disruptors. Picture this: labor shortages persisting despite technological advances, regulatory inertia, bureaucratic red tape stifling innovation, and don't forget market volatility. Financial crises could upend the steady flow of investments. Lastly, consumer resistance. People may cling to traditional homes, wary of change. How should we brace the industry for these challenges? And perhaps more intriguingly, are there any unexpected allies in this journey towards sustainable, affordable housing?
Yeah, Jean, you sound scary. I think out of the potential obstacles, in my view, the one we really need to work on is the talent gap. It is the biggest issue for productivity today. And in my mind, it will be the biggest issue for productivity in future. So that is the one where the industry will have to work on, companies on themselves will have to work on, governments will have to work on, and they all will also have to come together to work on it. So that is, I would say, if I single out one, that's sort of the one to deal with. Now, are there any allies that can help us on that? Potentially. I would say if you look at the education landscape today, it's not a helpful education landscape to produce the next generation of highly skilled construction workers. So if we could get the education landscape to produce more of them, that would be helpful, and they would be a real ally in this.
So, Jean, based on the conversation that we've had, what are 3 things that business leaders should do now to prepare for this future of a housing markets transformed by modular homes?
All right, let's boil it down for business leaders. Here are 3 actionable steps. 1, invest in talent. Create robust apprenticeship and training programs to close the skills gap. Attract a diverse talent pool by emphasizing safety, innovation, and growth opportunities. 2, foster public-private partnerships. Collaborate with governments to streamline permitting processes and standardize modular construction, easing the path for scalable housing solutions. 3, embrace tech integration. Incorporate AI-driven tools for quality assurance, project management, and energy efficiency to enhance productivity and sustainability.
I think it's an amazing vision. Well summarized.
So, Matthias, when you're talking to CEOs, what would you tell them is one no-regret move that they can make now to prepare for this future?
The one no-regret move is invest in technology. So construction or the housing industry overall may not be the first place that comes to your mind when you think about the benefits of technology, AI, and others. but it is a place where you can get out a lot. And given that one of the major issues the industry is facing is a talent shortage, I do think technology, specifically AI, can be part of the solution here. So my advice is the one no regret move is to invest in technology and to leverage it.
That's Matthias Tauber, Senior Partner and Managing Director at BCG. Want to learn more about how we work with our AI bot, Gene? Stick around for our AI handler, Bill Moore, to show you what Gene is capable of.
Hi, I'm Bill Moore, and I'm part of the team that created Gene. Today, let's simulate a conversation set in 2035 between an architect and an AI assistant exploring revolutionary sustainable building materials. So I have a new project. My client wants to build a sustainable modular home, so I need your assistance to select the best options. Can you help me outline the materials and technologies we should consider?
Absolutely, Bill. Let's start by considering the structural framework. For the main structure, I recommend using advanced cross-laminated timber, CLT, made from sustainably managed, genetically enhanced, fast-growing trees. CLT offers high strength-to-weight ratios and sequesters carbon, reducing the overall environmental impact.
Well, that's good, Gene. Have there been any improvements in CLT since the early days?
Yes, in the past decade, we've developed nano-engineered CLT panels infused with graphene. This enhancement increases structural strength, fire resistance, and durability while maintaining sustainability.
Cool. So for the foundation, we're looking to minimize concrete use due to its carbon footprint. Do we have any alternatives?
Consider using carbon-negative concrete, like carbocrete. It's produced using steel slag waste and sequesters CO2 during curing.
Okay. Moving on to insulation. We're aiming for high thermal performance with sustainable materials. What do we got?
Mycelium-based insulation is an excellent choice. It's grown from the root structure of fungi using agricultural waste. It offers superior thermal and acoustic insulation, is fire-resistant, and fully biodegradable at the end of its life cycle.
Wonderful. Any suggestions for regulating the home's temperature?
Yes. Applying the ultra-white paint developed by Purdue University to the exterior surfaces can reflect up to 98.1% of sunlight. This reduces heat absorption, keeping the interior cooler and lowering the need for air conditioning.
Okay, thanks for the explanation, Gene. I'm excited to present this plan to my clients.
Best of luck with the project, and I look forward to seeing the final result.
Thanks, Gene. Talk soon.
This episode was made possible by Matthias Tauber, generously sharing his insights with us, and also by BCG's AI whisperer Bill Moore and BCG's Pod Squad, producer Michael May, composer Kenny Kusiak, and sound engineer George Drabing Hicks. Please subscribe and leave a rating wherever you found us.